What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, coming to Netflix on December 9th. This is a stop-motion animated feature film co-directed by del Toro, as well as Mark Gustafsson, who's making his directorial debut. And the screenplay adaptation is by del Toro and Patrick Mahale. I've never read the original source material of this 1883 Italian novel, The Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, but I've seen the Disney movie from 1940 several times, and I've always found it a little strange that so many filmmakers are so completely, totally fixated on doing their own version of Pinocchio, but I haven't read the book, so maybe I'm totally missing out on one of the great, kind of fantasy sagas, but I just have never been that interested in the topic, even though as a kid, obviously, I loved watching Pinocchio, especially all those scenes with Monstro at the end, which I think that's some of the most gorgeous animation of that era. And the movie's strangely kind of nightmarish when all those kids start like turning into donkeys. But at any rate, that's neither here nor there. But every once in a while, a big major filmmaker will announce that they want to do Pinocchio. I remember like Francis Ford Coppola in the 90s wanted to do Pinocchio, and Roberto Benigni did Pinocchio, and then we saw Robert Zemeckis do that really strange live-action remake, which was totally roundly rejected by every living, breathing being earlier this year. And I just want to say to all of them, like, what is the deal with Pinocchio, and why does everybody keep wanting to do it? Like, maybe find a new fairy tale or invent your own fairy tale from scratch. But for del Toro, he's been wanting to make Pinocchio since 2008, and it had a bunch of different homes before it finally landed at Netflix, and it's a big, prestigious stop-motion production starring Ewan McGregor. It's got Tilda Swinton, Christoph Waltz, Ron Perlman, who's obviously and wherever del Toro goes, Ron Perlman goes. But we also got Finn Wolfhard, Kate Blanchett, Tim Blake Nelson, John Turturro. It's an incredible cast. But before I go any further, let me just say I love del Toro's movies. I love del Toro's persona. I love everything about him. But I did not love Pinocchio, but I'm going to offer some very respectful criticisms, but I really struggle when it's time to make a video that's critical of one of my filmmaking heroes. I'd almost rather just not make the video entirely. And I watched this movie a couple days ago, and it almost kind of made up my mind not to say anything, but I feel like that's kind of chicken shit. I mean, I've got a YouTube channel devoted to film and television, and I shouldn't only make positive videos about the filmmakers I admire. But after a couple of days of chewing on the movie, I finally gave myself a kick on the ass. I was like, you know what? Just review the film. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to kind of tap dance around the fact that you didn't like the movie. Just tell the truth. I mean, telling the truth is a key part of the story of Pinocchio, and his growing nose whenever he tells a lie and that sort of thing. So the truth is, I really wanted to like it. I love animation. I love del Toro, but I just did not respond to the movie, and I think it's going to divide a lot of people out there. But if I had my way, del Toro would be making $200 million films every other year. His adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountain of Madness would have already reached the screen. Like, I want nothing but the best for the guy. And when I hear him say things like he would give up some of his own life in order to give more life to filmmakers like Martin Scorsese so that they could continue making movies, I feel like he's just all around an incredibly positive force in the film industry. And his obsessive love of great books and great movies, you can feel in every single frame of film that he shoots, even if the films, they go up and down in quality, as is totally normal for any filmmaker. And I felt like when Nightmare Alley did not find an audience last year, it really made me depressed because I thought that was one of his strongest movies in a long time. It was just nightmarish, a little long, but really strong stuff, and it just fucking died. I was like, wow, the audience for this kind of movie just does not exist anymore. But this version of Pinocchio, it marks the end of his kind of unofficial trilogy about death and fascism, which started with Devil's Backbone and then continued with Pan's Labyrinth. And I think those are del Toro's two strongest movies. Maybe because he's just working in his native Spanish language, but those projects, they really found a way to thread that needle of exploring an innocent supernatural story, whether that's ghosts or fauns or whatever the case might be, but at the same time, tackling really intense, visceral political subject matter like the Spanish Civil War. And he continues with that theme with Pinocchio, but I don't think that he managed to pull off the delicate balancing act that he pulled off in the previous two movies nearly as well with this, because this is purely subjective, but from my point of view, the innocent tone of a story about Pinocchio with songs and fairies and talking crickets and all that stuff, it really clashes hard with a movie about Italian fascism on the eve of World War II, even if some of the stuff about Mussolini and whatnot is incredibly humorous in this. And I went into this movie really wanting to like it. I have a big soft spot for animation, in particular stop motion animation. I just love how it's so tactile. It feels so physical, like you can touch it and interact with it. And it just has kind of a living, breathing quality that a lot of kind of more traditional Disney animation lacks. And I've dabbled in the world of animation as a producer. I worked as a producer on a feature film called Cheatin' with director Bill Plimpton, and we did a couple shorts together as well. So I love animation, in particular animation that is not geared toward 5-year-old children watching Disney Plus. So it almost kind of tore my soul in two as this movie got started, and I realized I just wasn't responding to it, and I would have to like pause it and kind of walk around, and it was like a fight to get through this, because as much as I love the design of the character, which is just awe-inspiring, and as much as I love the design of some of the characters, like I don't know if he's called Monstro in this or the more traditional name of the terrible dogfish. In any event, the big giant whale-like Leviathan just looks incredible in this. But the moment the characters started singing, I was like, oh no, like I'm gonna fucking hate a lot of this movie just because I wasn't responding to the music. And I think that's gonna be a big make or break moment for a lot of people. Music is so subjective. But when you respond to it, it's like an immediate like gut instinct where after a couple seconds, you're either completely in the, like surrendering over to the music, or you're just rejecting. And obviously you can come around on certain songs, but over the course of this movie, every time the character started singing, I was just vomiting the movie back up. I was just rejecting it entirely. So that's like a quarter of the movie right then and there that I found to be unendurable, even if I was completely, totally enthralled by the look of this world that they've created. But another major obstacle for me, and I hate to say this because this actor, I really admire him. I've been watching him in movies since friggin' Shallow Grave in the mid-90s, but Ewan McGregor is awful as Sebastian J. Cricket, who is the narrator of the story. He's a major character, obviously, but there's something about his delivery, his style of voice acting, his accent, that I felt like it really clashed with the movie. And honestly, they should have just recast the role. And with animation, it's beautiful because you don't have to reshoot anything. You can just record their dialogue all over again. But this is going to be one of those things where I don't know how other people are going to react, but every single time he spoke, it took me out of the movie. Whereas other actors like David Bradley, who plays Geppetto, just was hitting one home run after another. And I really enjoyed Gregory Mann as Pinocchio, and his performance is interesting where he's annoying as hell, but deliberately so, where he's brand new to this world, so he's got this insatiable curiosity and exuberance, but also he's like a tyrant and a spoiled brat and has all this horrible behavior that has to kind of be beaten out of him over time. And the movie is way darker than the 1940 interpretation. I mean, there is a lot of death, and the movie employs this really interesting device where there's like a fairy tale underworld that Pinocchio has to go to and from, where he interacts with one of the two characters played by Tilda Swinton. She plays the wood sprite that kind of brings him to life in the first place, but she also plays the wood sprite's sister, Death, who oversees this underworld. And so all that stuff was really cool. But I think where this movie gets into trouble is when it tries to take on Mussolini and the fascists, which I felt like when Del Toro took on the Spanish Civil War in Pan's Labyrinth, he did it brilliantly. And in a lot of ways, it's one of my favorite movies about the Spanish Civil War. And I felt like he really found a way to tackle fascism in a way that was like completely, totally nightmarish, but also at the same time totally organic to the story he was telling. Whereas here, it really seems like almost kind of a clumsy, awkward fit in a lot of ways. It just feels a little too heavy and excessive for a story about a puppet that has come to life, and it goes all in with like the youth training camps that were grooming people to join Mussolini's forces and that sort of thing. And Ron Perlman is really just chewing the scenery as somebody who is all in on Mussolini's vision for Italy. But at a certain point, these scenes start to feel really long and the movie starts to feel really long. It's a 2-hour movie, which is not a particularly long movie. But like I said, I was having to stop this movie, walk around, take a break, stretch, read a book, get on Twitter or whatever. I found this movie to be a very tough sit overall. But let me pause for a bit and just call attention to some of the ingredients that I really liked. Stop motion is not for everybody, but goddamn, if you like filmmakers like Jan Svankmajer, stop motion, it's just a very rare, special form of storytelling. And I just don't feel like animation should be exclusively the domain of a company like Disney, which has such a narrow brand of storytelling. And I do like the fact that Guillermo del Toro got to use the style of stop motion to tell a story that is uniquely his own. And there's some sequences that are particularly good. Like when Geppetto's making Pinocchio for the first time, it's almost like a Universal horror movie with like lightning and Geppetto getting drunk and Jiminy Cricket calling it a house of horrors. It was just fantastic. And when the wood sprite shows up, once again, Del Toro has proven himself to be a master of creature design many times over the course of his now 30-year career, but I just love the look of all these creatures. And the wood sprite's sister just looks so goddamn good, with like her horns going out and they have all these eyeballs along the horns that are blinking. It's just, the texture of the film is very rich, it's very dense, there's just a lot to chew on. And when the big giant monster shows up toward the end, which is my favorite part of the original 1940 cartoon as well, goddamn, Del Toro, his imagination, every once in a while, he allows it to completely run wild. And I loved everything about that whole sequence. But on the other hand, this movie really struggles to mix the really heavy ingredients with the very light ingredients. There's a lot of stuff in here where Pinocchio's wondering, well, how can people worship like Jesus and the cross, another figure made of wood, but they look at me as like the work of the devil? And I don't really know who the audience is for this movie, because I don't think this movie is intended for like children. Once again, it's grappling with Mussolini and death and Christianity. These are very weighty, complex topics. But on the other hand, I feel like the movie's too innocent for adults who want a really rigorous, dark examination of Italy during this period. The songs and the more serious subject matter for me, they completely, totally clash and they reject each other. And I almost feel like there are two different movies here that are struggling to kind of go in very different directions, and it's just got a little bit of an identity crisis. But in closing, I'll just say, I hope everyone disagrees with me, and I hope everyone loves the movie, because I want to see Guillermo del Toro making shitloads of shows and movies over at Netflix for the rest of his career. I don't think Disney's a good fit for him. Maybe Warner Brothers Discovery would be a good fit for him, maybe Universal, but I feel like Netflix, because of their emphasis on international programming, shows and movies from South Korea, whatever the case might be, I just feel like Del Toro could really express himself. Or even just seeing how filmmakers like Alejandro González Iñárritu is getting to make movies like Bardo for Netflix. It just seems like international content is just a much better fit at Netflix. And I don't know how well his Cabinet of Curiosities did for Netflix, but it was cool to seeing him give an opportunity to so many different directors to tell stories in the horror genre. So nothing would make me happier than to see Netflix and Del Toro form a very long-lasting partnership. And I want to see Del Toro making every single movie or show that's banging around inside that wildly imaginative brain of his. I want them all to reach the screen in an uncompromised, pure fashion. And so ignore this video, ignore everything I had to say about my complaints. Watch Pinocchio and tell all your friends to do so, because I don't like the movie. But moving forward, as Del Toro kind of gets into the second half mature phase of his career, I just want every possible door to be open to him moving forward. He's just one of those directors that there are a handful of directors out there where their love of the medium of cinema and the love of the history of cinema just makes them a very positive force in the industry. And there are people like Martin Scorsese. Loves making movies, but he also loves making documentaries about movies, like A Personal Journey Through American Filmmaking with Martin Scorsese. Or Quentin Tarantino loves making movies, but he also loves writing books like Cinema Speculation, which celebrates his love of film from the 1970s. Or people like Peter Bogdanovich. They made movies, but they also wrote books like Who the Devil Made It, where they interview directors. Del Toro is one of those guys where his presence in the industry is like a rising tide that lifts all ships. But I'm starting to lose the thread of this review. I'm going to wrap things up. But before I go, I must bring you a word from Manscaped, the official sponsor of my podcast, Wrong Reel. It's never too early to play holiday music, and it's never too early to start thinking about gifts. Whether it's for a friend or the friends in your pants, you can make this a season to be jolly at Manscaped. Do your little drummer boy a favor and use the Lawnmower 4.0 to avoid another silent night in the bedroom. Then add in Manscaped's top-of-the-line shower products to have the people thinking, all I want for Christmas is you. Santa cares about a sack, and so should you. Look nice when you get naughty by going to manscaped.com and using the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps for free shipping and 20% off. Inside, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold your goodies. Think of it as the perfect package for your package. So as we enter the Christmas season, I know everybody's got too much crap to buy, but if you've got some spare cash left over after you've bought all the presents for your loved ones and you want to find a way to support this channel or my podcast, Wrong Reel, this is the way to do so. But I hope you enjoyed this review. If so, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out if you want to tell me why this is the greatest stop-motion masterpiece ever and that I was totally wrong. I will accept that. But once again, thank you so much for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.